Hello everyone. The philosopher we're looking at this week is Immanuel Kant. It's important to have the timeline up right now because what Kant represents is this middle figure in the era of the Enlightenment. So you have the modern philosophy beginnings with Descartes. People are becoming more scientific. They're questioning the old ancient wisdom. What Kant wants to do is double back and say, should we really be throwing out everything that the ancients have taught us? Should we only trust the scientists to get us to the truth? Kant wants to test the assumptions of the new empirical philosophies as set forth by people like John Locke and David Hume, and to ask whether science is the best way to get towards the truth. Now that is what we're going to talk about first, is Kant's general epistemology and his philosophy of knowledge. But this is all as a background to Kant's ethics, which is the focus of the lesson, which we will be getting to after we talk a little bit about his general context. So, as I said, Kant is writing at a time when science is becoming more and more dominant as a way for people to understand things. So you have Isaac Newton pictured here, who's grounding his theory in evidence and experiment. And he has these famous 3 laws of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and so forth. What Kant wants to do is take that inspiration from Newton, that there are laws of physics and laws of nature, and then apply it to the ethical realm and say maybe there are laws of ethics, just like there are laws of nature. The other reason the scientific mindset is relevant is because it is something that Kant is growing concerned about. Something like the fact that people almost seem to have a new faith in science and they have lost the sense of meaning given to us from classical ancient philosophy. So Kant is writing in the late 1700s. He's Prussian, which is now known as Germany. He lived in sort of eastern Germany in a place called Königsberg. And in 1781, he publishes the Critique of Pure Reason. Now, this book talks about his general epistemology, this idea that there is this thing as such as pure reason, which we can't know scientifically, but we can understand because there are such things like logical laws and so forth. Now, in a lot of ways, Kant's philosophy is a second draft, if you like, of Plato's philosophy. Remember, Plato believes that there are these truths of mathematics and geometry which the human mind can understand. So in a similar fashion, there are truths of ethics which the human mind can understand. Kant is very much in the Platonic tradition, but he's speaking to this modern audience that is grounded in science, so his arguments get a little bit more complicated. That being said, if you're familiar with and understand Plato's philosophy, you can use a lot of those concepts and ideas to understand Kant's philosophy. So, once he sets out his general epistemology and metaphysics in the Critique of Pure Reason, he writes an essay called The Grounding for the Metaphysics of Morals in 1784. And in this relatively short essay, Kant lays out his view of morality and ethics. He argues for laws of reason that should guide ethics, and there's a certain logic to it, and he articulates his principles using examples. So once it's laid out, it's relatively easy to understand what Kant is saying. The question then becomes, do you agree with him? Kant's philosophy is sometimes referred to as transcendental idealism. Now, I put this picture up of these sort of spooky looking trees with this mysterious light in the background to evoke this sense of mystery. Kant believes that we can know a lot about the world around us, but we cannot know everything. That there are certain limits to what we can know. And beyond these limits, the world is essentially mysterious. This is a philosophy born out of Descartes' skepticism, which we looked at in the last lesson. Remember, Descartes is questioning, how do we know about the outside world? How do we know that things out there are really as they appear? And the different answers that philosophers have given to this question have caused Kant to rethink his assumptions and articulate his epistemology. Okay, so before you ever take a philosophy class, you go for a walk in the park, you see the tree, the end. You move on with your day, okay? The leaves are green, the tree is brown, the sky is blue. What's for lunch? Okay, there's no question about reality here. And then the philosopher comes along and says, you perceive the tree through your senses. So the tree appears to you to be a certain way. But how do you know that the way things appear to you are the same as they are out there in the world? This split between perception and reality, or subjectivity and objectivity, is something that has troubled philosophers for a long time, and different philosophers have given different answers to this. Now, if you remember from the last lesson, Descartes introduces the idea that our senses lie to us while we're dreaming, so therefore we can't trust our senses to tell us the truth about the outside world. Also remember John Locke from last lesson. John Locke says, how do we know about the outside world? From experience. We trust our senses tell us what's going on in the world, our senses are the source of truth. This philosophy of empiricism that John Locke articulates is something Kant is not comfortable with. Kant says about Locke, if we're supposed to trace our knowledge to the vulgar origins of experience, then this would be a grave mistake for epistemology. We cannot trust the vulgar origin of experience. Now, what's so vulgar about experience? It's hard to imagine what exactly Kant had in mind. But think of it this way. Think about world cultures, okay? You have different groups of people who might be looking at something out there in the world and feel one way about it in one culture and another way about it in another culture. Well, the problem for the philosopher is, how do we know who's right? Which culture gets the hold on the truth? So to say that knowledge comes from experience implies that one culture has one set of truths and another culture has another set of truths. For Kant, this does not make sense. Kant wants there to be truth out there which is universal and absolute. Just like 2 + 2 is 4, the tree grows a certain way, or whatever the thing is. If we have a question about reality, there should be a definitive answer. Again, very much in the Platonic tradition. Kant's response here is a little strange. Kant takes the perception and reality distinction and goes and runs with it, and he says, okay, we only know about the world through our perception. That means we are, in a sense, locked into our own heads. We have this bubble of perception which we see the world through, and the real world that exists out there is off limits. We can only know things through our perception, but our knowledge of the reality is without grounding. We don't know if there's really a tree out there. We think there's a tree out there. Our best guess and our best assumption based on all the evidence we have is that there's a tree out there. But it could be correct that it's all an illusion. Now, does Kant really believe that the world is an illusion? No. Okay? He understands that there's trees out there. But think of it in the other direction. Think of the scientific mindset which says the tree is out there, we can dissect it, look at the cells, we can know about atoms and particles, and we can know everything about the physical world. We can do Newtonian physics, quantum physics, whatever it is, and we say, we understand the laws of gravity, the laws of nature, we got it. We understand the universe. Kant introduces the mysterious quality to our epistemology. Kant says, there might be more out there which we don't really know about. There might be more beyond our perception which is unknown. Now, some people are uncomfortable with this. Some people want to say, no, we are experts at knowledge. We can know what's out there in the world. There's no mysteries, Kant. Stop making us uncomfortable. Kant leaves room in the universe for the unknown. Now, when it comes to the things out there in the world that are causing our perception, the greenishness of the ground, the bluishness of the sky, whatever those things out there that are causing us to see what we see, are essentially for Kant unknowable, because they are through the filter of our perceptive apparatus. Kant calls the things out there that are causing our perceptions noumena, or things in themselves. Those things out there which make us see what we see are mysterious entities. And the things as they appear to us, Kant calls phenomena. So, what does this mean for ethics? You can look at actions out there in the world. People being nice to each other, people being mean to each other, people doing good things, people doing bad things. Okay? Things appear to you to be a certain way, right? Maybe your country's fighting a war, so you believe they're doing the right thing. But it's as it appears to you. The truth of the matter, the noumenal reality of the ethical quality of an action, is unknown, mysterious. We cannot know for sure whether something is good or bad. Now, does Kant stop there, throw his hands in the air, and just say, forget ethics, we can't know anything, do whatever you want? No. Okay? Again, with Descartes' philosophy, you could lead down a path towards total nihilism or belief in nothing and just be a solipsistic, self-absorbed individual. Descartes does not want us to be self-absorbed individuals. Kant does not want us to throw our hands in the air and forget about ethics. But if we're going to know the ethical truth of things, we cannot trust our perception. Think of Plato in the allegory of the cave, right? They're sitting in the cave, they're being manipulated by the puppeteers. They know what they're taught, and that's that. Kant wants us to be suspicious of our upbringing and what we're taught, and to not assume that the ideas that we've been filtering through are correct. So in order to understand the ethical quality of the world, we have to think things through not based on how things appear to us, but we have to think things through in a rational, logical sense, just like we would think through math and geometry. So out there in the mysterious metaphysical realm, there are the truths of math and geometry. 2 plus 2 is 4. The circumference of a circle is pi r squared. Similarly, out there in the universe at the metaphysical level, which is mysterious but knowable through pure reason alone, we have truths of ethics. Kant refers to his ethics as having categorical imperatives. For Kant, it's something like, would you do unto others as you would have done unto yourself? Think of something you want to do. You ask yourself, is it good or bad? So say, would you will your actions to be a universal law? Would you want everyone to do the thing that you're about to do? Now, if you think it's bad for other people to do it, then you shouldn't do it either. Furthermore, are you treating anyone merely as a means? Are you treating people as things in your way, means to your own end? Well, would you want people to treat you that way? No. Therefore, don't treat other people that way. Kant wants us to respect each other, to treat each other with dignity, and to treat others as we'd want to be treated. Now, this might sound simplistic and obvious, sort of kindergarten level ethics. However, when you're dealing with a skeptic who says, I don't care about ethics, I can do whatever I want, nothing matters, you have to have something to say to them to defend the idea that, no, there's something wrong about your actions. And that's what Kant wants to do, is to articulate a theory of ethics which is going to give people the means to tell people, no, you're doing something wrong there. So when you think about the system of laws and what makes something legal or illegal and what makes a judge decide somebody to be guilty or innocent of a crime, hopefully the thing that's guiding the laws of a political system are rationality and logic. And things are legal or illegal because they make sense to a rational being. Kant is part of the Enlightenment tradition, where laws should be laws because they make sense. Not because some king was born into a royal bloodline and just makes arbitrary decisions based on their personal whims. Kant believes that ethics should not only guide our private lives, but should also guide the political realm. So, what Kant is ultimately articulating is a revolutionary philosophy. So before we get into the text, let's just talk about a couple concepts that Kant's going to be working with. Alright? The first key to being a good person, to being ethical, is acting with a good will. Okay? It's not enough to do the right thing. You have to do the right thing for the right reason. So with Kant, intentions are important. Okay? How your mind is while you're doing something is more important than the thing you're actually doing. Okay? And Kant's going to draw some distinctions which we'll talk about shortly. Next, he's going to talk about inclination versus duty. Okay? There are the things that we want to do, what our inclination is telling us, and then there are the things that we have to do, the things that duty tells us to do. Kant is going to argue that the more you act in accordance with duty, the more ethical you are being. The more you act out of inclination, the less ethical you are being. Now this is arguably a weak spot of his ethical philosophy, which we'll get to shortly. Kant speaks a little bit about happiness, and unlike Aristotle, who wants us to have well-being and happiness as our goal, Kant believes that happiness is an irrelevant goal to being ethical. Again, a little strange. Arguably the most rational, logical part of Kant's ethics is this idea of the categorical imperative, this idea that if something is right or wrong for one person, then it's right or wrong for everybody. Kant believes that if something should be a rule, it should be a rule for everyone. And last, the distinction between means and ends, which we touched upon a moment ago. Kant does not want us to treat other people as a means. He wants us to treat people as ends in themselves. This idea of respecting human dignity is very important for Kant's ethics. Okay, so that's the introduction. Now to the text. Nothing in the world, indeed nothing even beyond the world, can possibly be conceived which could be called good without qualification except a good will. We have then to develop the concept of a will, which is to be esteemed as good in itself without regard to anything else. It dwells already in the natural and sound understanding, and does not need so much to be taught as only to be brought to light. Sounds like Plato. In order to show this, we shall take the concept of duty. It is easily decided whether an action in accord with duty is done from duty or from some selfish purpose. Okay? So Kant, in defining a good will, is drawing a distinction between actions done from duty and actions done from a selfish purpose. If you're doing something selfishly, you are not acting out of goodwill. And if you're doing something out of duty, you are acting out of goodwill. So Kant uses an example to make his point. He talks about a shopkeeper who needs to charge a certain price to his customers. Okay? Now, he gets an inexperienced customer, someone who doesn't know what's going on, and they just have a big pile of money. And they're almost willing to pay anything for the product. What does the shopkeeper do? He charges the right price, the customer pays the correct price, and leaves. Now, the shopkeeper does the right thing. Is it automatically a good act? No. We have to look at the motives of the shopkeeper. Okay, if you charge the right price because it's the right thing to do, because that's what the honest thing is, then you are acting out of goodwill. You are acting out of duty. It's your duty as an honest merchant to charge the correct price. But if you're charging the right price because you want people to think that you're honest, that you want a good reputation in the community, that you want people to like who you are, if you want the repeat business, then yes, you're doing the right thing, but you're doing it for the wrong reasons. This is an interesting distinction worth emphasizing. Again, for Kant, it's not enough to do the right thing. You have to do it for the right reasons. You have to do it because it's the right thing, not because of the advantages you can get from it. Now, Kant goes from a rather mundane, everyday example of ethics to a very heavy example, and talks about a depressed individual who wants to commit suicide, and asks the question, why does this person keep going? Why don't they kill themselves? If you stay alive because you get some selfish pleasure out of the world, you like going to the movies or listening to music or hanging out with friends or eating food, you're not staying alive for the right reasons. Kant wants you to stay alive because you have to. It's your duty. But if adversities and hopeless sorrow completely take away the relish for life, if an unfortunate man, strong in soul, is indignant rather than despondent or dejected over his fate and wishes for death, and yet preserves his life without loving it, and from neither inclination nor fear, but from duty, then his maxim has moral merit. What is Kant worried about? Why is he making this crazy argument? We can only speculate. But something that comes to mind is the individual who has things that they love about life, and that's the reason that they keep on living. What if those things are taken away? What if your reason for living is the people in your life that you love, or coming home to your pet, or something like this, right? What if those people die? What if your pet dies? What do you do then? Do you just kill yourself because you have no reason to live anymore? Kant wants us to have the reason to live to be something which is out of this world, which is a concept, a notion of duty. If we do things because of the rewards we get, you can set up a psychology where people might do bad things for the rewards. But if you do things because they're right in and of themselves, because they're right on a purely theoretical level, then no amount of temptation or reward can get you to do something unethical. You will do the right thing because it is the right thing, and you won't do the wrong thing no matter how tempting the rewards might be. It is in this way, undoubtedly, that we should understand those passages of Scripture which command us to love our neighbor and even our enemy. For love as an inclination cannot be commanded, but beneficence from duty, even when no inclination impels it, is practical love. It resides in the will, and not in the propensities of feeling, in principles of action, and not in tender sympathy, and it alone can be commanded. Okay, Kant is in part in the Platonic tradition, but Kant is also reaching into the Christian tradition. So this Christian idea of loving your neighbor and even loving your enemy, we can't really love our neighbor and our enemy in the way that we would love someone close to us, but we can love them out of a sense of duty because it's the right thing to do. This requires an act of will. You have to force yourself into this way of being. Now, some of you might be thinking, why should we be changing who we are? If we naturally want to love the people closest to us and hate the people far away from us, why isn't that okay? Well, think about how that plays out. If you only love the people close to you and you're either indifferent or you hate the other people out there, what will become of the world? If you force yourself to treat other people with dignity, to, in a sense, love all of humanity, what will be the result? Counter-argument, you might be thinking, who cares about the reward for our actions? Didn't Kant just say that he wants us to do things for the right reason, but not for the benefit we get out of it? Yes. But how would you feel as a person knowing that you're doing your best to treat other people well? You might start to feel like you're doing the right thing in life. Perhaps. Therefore, the moral worth of an action does not lie in the effect which is expected. The preeminent good can consist only in the conception of law in itself, which can be present only in a rational being. Two very big ideas on the screen right now. The one is, we don't do good things for what we get out of it. We do good things because they're good. And secondly, because we are rational beings, because we can think about what we're doing, then we get credit for doing the right thing. Because we have a choice, because we could be bad if we wanted to, we deserve recognition from ourselves, if you like, for being good. Okay, so to go back to the Aristotelian idea that humans are rational and animals are not, when a dog is trained to save a person, we're proud of the dog, we're happy about the dog, but we say they're a good dog, but they don't really have a choice. They were trained that way. Okay? But a human being which decides to be good, we give them credit for making those good choices. So, Kant introduces into the moral psychology of his ideas this idea of the will. Okay? Everything in nature works according to laws. Isaac Newton. Only a rational being has the capacity of acting in according to the conception of laws, i.e. according to principles. This capacity is the will. So, in addition to human beings having reason, we also have will. So, we know the right thing to do, but we also have to act on it. We have to push ourselves to do those right things. So, what does it mean to act rationally in terms of ethics? Think of something you might want to do, and then ask yourself, would I want everybody to do that? Okay? Should I change lanes on the highway without using my blinker? Well, if everybody did that, things would be a mess. Okay, I would want other people to do that and give me that courtesy, therefore I will show that courtesy to others. Okay? Would I want someone to interrupt me when I'm talking? No, so therefore I shouldn't interrupt other people when they're talking. If I was taken prisoner on a battlefield, would I want to be tortured and waterboarded? No, I hope not. Therefore, if other people are taken prisoner in our prison camps, would we want to torture and waterboard them? No. There is, therefore, only one categorical imperative. It is, act only according to that maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. If you wouldn't want someone to do it to you, don't do it to anybody else. It doesn't matter the circumstances. It doesn't matter the consequences. If something is right or wrong, nothing can change that. There's all these ethical examples, would you kill one person to save 1,000? Kant would say absolutely not. You cannot kill an innocent person to save 1,000 people. The consequences do not justify the thing that you do. The ends do not justify the means. Okay? Would you steal to feed your family? No. The ends do not justify the means. If you're struggling to feed your family, you might want to steal. It's your inclination to steal. You could think in your head that it's the right thing to do. But Kant would say, no, you have a duty to not steal. Maybe you have a duty to get a job, earn an income to be able to feed your family. Kant gives us 4 examples to work out this theory. These are test cases to try to understand his ethics. The first one is the suicidal individual. Would we want everybody in the world to kill themselves if they felt depressed? No, I hope not, okay? Because everybody goes through a rough patch here and there, but you have to have the will to do the right thing, which is stay alive. You have to be rational. You have to will yourself to get out of bed and keep going. If you're in need of money, would you ask for a loan knowing that you were unable to pay it back? Would you borrow money from somebody knowing full well you couldn't repay the debt? No. Again, what if everybody did that? What if our economy was built on people taking loans they couldn't afford, knowing full well they couldn't repay them? Things would turn out pretty poorly. Recent history is a reflection of this. Okay? Should people have taken out mortgages to buy houses they knew full well they couldn't afford? No. Is that all the borrower's fault? Maybe not. Maybe we could reverse this and say, should people lend money to borrowers knowing full well that they wouldn't repay them? Well, you would say, what kind of a borrower would lend somebody money knowing they wouldn't be able to get paid back? To which the modern banker says, I don't care if they pay me back because I'm going to sell their debt to somebody else, so it's irrelevant. And we can go further down the rabbit hole. Should the government let bankers lend to people knowing that the money won't be paid back? Thorny questions, okay? But we might have avoided the recent housing bubble and subsequent housing crash and recession if people lived within their means, were honest with themselves about what they could afford, didn't lie to themselves about what they could borrow, and so forth. If we were more rational and acted in accordance with reason, maybe we wouldn't have had the sort of roller coaster economy of the past 10 years. If we could lay in a hammock all day, every day, like the South Sea Islanders, would we do it? Well, our inclination would be to say yes, right? We want to just relax. We want to just calm down and just have a nice day watching Netflix or whatever the thing is, right? These are our inclinations. These are the things we want to do. But we should realize that we have a duty to ourselves or the universe or whatever mysterious thing is out there. We have a duty to do something with our lives, to achieve our full potential, to get up off the couch and go to work. Again, if everybody laid in a hammock all day, what would be the result? Nothing would get done. Society would turn into a bunch of lazy people. Kant implies here that there's this tug of war in ourselves, right? There's the things we want to do, and there's the things we have to do. And although it'd be easier to take the easy road, right, we have to push ourselves to do the things which we don't really want to do, but which we have to do. Now, Kant refers to this duty as an imperfect duty, whereas the duty not to kill yourself and to be honest about borrowing money, those are perfect duties. So we have to stay alive, we have to be honest about borrowing money, but when it comes to doing something with your life, it's a soft duty. We don't have to do it, but we should do it. And the next one Kant talks about is another imperfect duty. We don't have to help people out, but we should. Kant talks about someone who's struggling and asking for help. What should we do? Our inclination would be to keep on walking to work, ignore the beggar, and go on with our day. We don't want to feel bad for this guy. We want to just pretend like everything's fine. So we put the downtrodden person out of our heads. Now, again, this is an imperfect duty. We could continue on with our day and not really have done anything wrong. But we should help others when we can. If you have the ability to help somebody out who's struggling, you should do it. And not because it makes you feel better about yourself. That would be done out of inclination, the right thing for the wrong reason. If you can help somebody out, Kant would want you to do it because it's the right thing to do. Kant is admittedly a bit of a tough character. Kant wants us to do the right things for the right reasons. It's an odd picture of ethics, I agree. A common response is, this is too harsh. Why can't we find joy out of living? Why can't we find joy out of our work, right? Why can't we take some sort of selfish pleasure in helping those in need? To which I would respond, Kant knows that we're only human, okay? He knows that there's always going to be some part of ourselves which enjoys doing the right thing. Yes, we'll do the right thing for the right reasons, but there's going to be some part of us which is going to feel good about it, okay? Kant knows that we're not robots doing the right thing for the right reason at all times. The question is, if you had to draw a picture of how much you're motivated by selfishness and how much you're motivated by duty, the more that you do things out of selfishness, the less ethical you are. And the more you do things for the right reasons, the more ethical you are. Now again, you don't have to agree with this. All I want is for you to understand it, and if you disagree with this ethics, that's fine, but at least you know why you disagree with it. Kant lays out all the cards on the table. He says, we don't know any of this for sure. Remember, the whole epistemology is this mysterious, noumenal, who knows what, right? So he says, we are not yet advanced far enough to prove a priori or in advance that that kind of imperative really exists. That there is a practical law which of itself commands absolutely and without any incentives, and that obedience to this law is duty. We don't know for sure if this stuff is really real. We can't prove it in a lab, okay? We can't go into a science laboratory and say, Where is this thing called duty? Where is this thing called reason? Where are practical laws? But we can think about them. They're abstractions. Now, it might be one of your responses to say, it's just an abstraction, therefore is not real, to which Kant would give the Platonic response, what about numbers? What about geometric truths? Okay? In a sort of Newtonian physics way of responding, he could say, well, what about gravity? Okay? You know gravity as a force, but it's not something real, to which you respond, of course it's real. You drop the ball, gravity is what's going on there. Well, Kant would say, okay, look at this person doing good out in the world. The thing which is pushing them to do good is duty. Okay? You can't see it, but you can see its effects. All right, we're going to shift gears for a minute and talk about Kant's notion of rational beings. Okay? Part of his ethics is this idea that rational beings deserve respect because they're rational beings. Because everybody is capable of knowing right from wrong, we should treat other people with dignity. Now, I say, man, and in general, every rational being exists as an end in himself and not merely as a means to be arbitrarily used by this or that will. In all his actions, whether they are directed toward himself or toward other rational beings, he must always be regarded at the same time as an end. The practical imperative, therefore, is the following. Act so that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, always as an end and never as means only. Okay? What does it mean to treat someone only as a means? You go to the store, you need to buy groceries, you get to the checkout line, you grumble at the cashier, you hand them your card, you take your stuff and go home. The cashier is just a thing, is just a means to your end. That would be unethical. Kant wants us to see other people as rational beings who deserve dignity and respect. Okay? Yes, they are the means to your groceries. You need to get through them to get what you want. But you can't treat people only as a means. You have to treat people with some level of respect because as a human being, people deserve dignity. How might you otherwise treat somebody merely as a means? Maybe giving somebody a harsh punishment to send a message to other people. You're treating that person as a means to your end. They become a thing to you. This is unethical. Kant goes back through the four examples and argues that they are, again, breaking the means versus end distinction. If you treat your body as a means to your end of happiness and your body's making unhappy, you kill yourself to be free of that burden. Okay, a little convoluted, I admit. Similarly, if you just want to lay in the hammock all day, your body is a means to your end of happiness, but you're not treating your body with respect that it deserves. If you lie to someone who you're trying to borrow money from, you're not respecting them. You're treating them like a thing. And if you walk past somebody who needs help and ignore them, you're treating them like a thing to be ignored because they're getting in the way of your own happiness. Just to plant a seed for some of our topics after the midterm, we're going to be talking about capitalism. And we're going to be asking the question, why do people work? What motivates people? What's up with this whole thing called making money? Why do people have jobs and so forth? So we're going to be looking at the Marxist, socialist philosophy, which says wealth is bad. And then we're going to look at the capitalist philosophy that says wealth is good and pursuit of wealth is a virtue. And I just want you to keep Kant's ethics in mind when we get there. Okay? Think about Kant's picture of ethics. Why do people work? Why does the shopkeeper sell his shoes here? Is it because he enjoys it? Yes, in part. Okay, part of him enjoys it. He likes the money. He likes the paycheck, right? But there's also a duty. He has a duty to stay alive. He has a duty to get off the couch. Okay, maybe he has a duty to feed his family. So he works because he has to. Okay, does Kant want us to lay on the couch and take a free handout from the government? Is Kant a socialist? I would argue no to this question. Kant wants us all to get off the couch and go to work. So, I'm just giving you a heads up. When people try to characterize Kant as a socialist, I would be very skeptical. Now, where do they get that idea from? This whole thing about loving your neighbor as yourself and helping people who are in need. But again, it's an imperfect duty. We don't have to help people, but we should if we can. Does Kant believe that in the future the best form of government is one in which the government is our parent and we can all just relax on the couch? Absolutely not. We all have to work. We have to stay alive. We have to be honest. The picture that results is a sort of work ethic. Okay? So, Kant is not a communist on this interpretation. If anything, the virtue here is pro-capitalist, is pro-hard work. Just a little more text before we're done. The practical necessity of acting according to this principle, duty, does not rest at all on feelings, impulses, and inclinations. It rests solely on the relation of rational beings to one another, in which the will of a rational being must always be regarded as legislative, for otherwise it could not be thought of as an end in itself. When you decide to do something, you make this decision based on a reason, based on a principle. You are legislating ethics every time you make a decision. And implicitly, you are deciding for everyone that your actions are good. This is kind of strange, but we have to think about the world out there. When people do good and bad things, how does it affect us? If you see someone out in the world doing something wrong, you have to almost take it personally and say, how could you possibly think that that is an acceptable action? What is wrong with you? This creates the sort of modern activist view of ethics, that we should all be on the same page, that we should all understand right from wrong. And if somebody out there in the world is doing some evil thing, they need to get their head straight. Reason, therefore, relates every maxim of the will as giving universal laws to every other will, and also to every action towards itself. It does so not for the sake of any other practical motive or future advantage, but rather from the idea of dignity of a rational being who obeys no law except one which he himself also gives. What is he talking about here? There's a couple ideas in this slide. Okay? The one thing about you don't do things for future advantage. You don't do the right thing for some benefit you can get out of it. Fair enough. But this idea that we should act from the idea of the dignity of a rational being who obeys no law except one which he himself also gives is sort of speaking to the state of nature theorists. Okay? If all of a sudden the government fell apart and there were only 100 of us left and we're out in the middle of the jungle, it was total anarchy, right? There were no laws, there were no policemen. Could we still do whatever we want? Could we still just be unethical? No. Ethics has to come from us. That we know right from wrong and we can decide what's right and wrong and act accordingly. We don't need other people to tell us right from wrong. We should know it and do it because it's the right thing to do. So, we've talked about justice as being this abstract thing which is out there in theory. Justice is blindfolded for two reasons. One, everyone should be treated equally under the law. But two, you have to think about the nature of justice. It's an abstraction, okay? Kant wants us not to trust our culture and not to treat people differently based on who they are. Kant wants us to act in accordance with universal principles and treat people with universal respect. This is a revolutionary philosophy for the late 1700s. And I hope it's given you something to think about. And I look forward to your responses on the discussion board. Thank you for your attention and participation. Have a great week.